you so much. That was great presentations. I'm particularly appreciative of the previous one because you did all the difficult work of explaining the terminology for me. My name is Will. I'm at Stratford School of U of W. I'm going to talk about something that I researched on for quite a while, but up until 2 months ago, no one wanted to talk about it. Actually, you would hate interacting with that technology. And something happened 2 months ago that changed everything. Now, people want to talk to me now because I studied that, right? That is chatbot. So the roadmap, I don't have a roadmap. I only have 10 minutes, so I'll skip that 45 seconds. Right, so moving on. So what is a chatbot? It's an intangible robot, okay, that performs somewhat automated informational tasks. So the basic idea is whether you're dealing with a verbal or the voice-based chatbot or text-based chatbot, you input unstructured human language. Okay, our language is not that structured. But then you get some output that is also somewhat human-like and a lot more structural. I talk about how people didn't want to interact with it. That was not entirely true. In fact, before this thing called ChatGPT came into being, we had a lot of enthusiasm, but mainly from organizations, not a lot from public, general public. The members of general public didn't want to interact a lot with chatbot. You would hate interacting with chatbot. You wanted a real person in the services you. But then organizations really loved that. So we have this organizational enthusiasm versus public, I call it public nonchalance situation here. Why organizations were so happy about having chatbot technology? For obvious reasons. We believe that, organizations believe that chatbot would allow us to give us the opportunity to do faster, cheaper, and more accurate analysis of vast amount of data. For example, we have a lot of applications in finance. MasterCard and many other companies, they develop a chatbot to facilitate the services that you would conduct, they would conduct with you. In education, chatbots have been mobilized to help students to learn with them. For example, in Stanford University, they developed some chatbot that really answers some of the content-related questions for the students. At the University of Waterloo, at Stratford School, myself and my students were developing chatbot that can potentially help our online student feel less isolated. Because when you're studying online, you're by yourself. But then human beings no longer, even if online education is great, but somehow a lot of our students feel like I am just all by myself. I still want to have that human connections. And chatbot can potentially help us give our students back that kind of human connections. Even in public service, chatbot has been mobilized. This is the Japanese example. So Hitachi developed a chatbot that was massively mobilized in a lot of public services. According to Hitachi, using chatbot is not only good for your business, it's also good for the environment. So it saves carbon emission, according to him. It's too small, my apologies. So it saves carbon emissions by 40%. Some of you are already thinking that means 40% of the work that was originally done by human beings are now done by. So is that a good thing or not? Moving on. So we talked about organizational enthusiasm, but there's also this public nonchalance. People didn't want to interact with chatbot. What do we see? From our research, we interviewed a lot of people, medical practitioners, students, educators, business practitioners, etc. Some common themes that we got from our research is that, they find chatbots hard to use. Remember 2 months ago, before ChatGPT was there? Was that your experience? It's very hard to use. So we saw this unwillingness for customers to input your data. I don't want to give my data, although I know I have to give them my data for this task to be finished. Also, mindfulness of sensitive data. So when you're dealing with a cumbersome chatbot, you're very mindful about what kind of data I'm giving them. Also, most customers at the time found information generated by chatbots dubious, right? So they would prefer to have human intervention. I don't know whether it happened to you. It happened to me, actually, quite often in the past. whether I was dealing with a voice-based chatbot or text-based, I always wanted to find a shortcut that allows me to talk to a real person, right? I actually memorized some of the keys, such as number 7, you hit number 7, or 0, that gets you to a real human being, right? And also, people people wanted to engage in what we call, in nerdy terms, triangulation. Basically, you want to find different sources that talk about the same information so that you know whether this information that you got from one source is right or wrong. So you triangulate, you verify. Now, this is typically what happened 2 months ago. Let me just give you some exaggerated interactions. For example, a text-based chatbot, typically you would have, please select an option above. And then you would type, let me see main menu. And then the answer would be, please select an option above. And then you would say, see original options. And then the answer would be, please select an option above. I can go on for 1 hour. Speech-based chatbots. You're talking to people on the phone, but actually no, you're talking to chatbot. This frustration was definitely shared by me on a weekly basis, right? I want to speak to your programmer, okay? All right. So all this seems to have changed overnight, right? Starting 2 months ago. So what really happened here? Why people changed from that person that didn't want to interact, didn't want to have anything to do with this technology, to someone that wants to have everything to do, especially our students, right? They want to have everything to do with this technology. So what happened? There's something called GPT, right? So generative pre-training transformer, which is a language model pre-trained on massive data set of text and fine-tuned on specific task, specific data. So there are 2 things here that are quite interesting. First, they can generate text that is coherent and relevant to your topic. So no more, please provide, that kind of, and also it can maintain its context across turns of the dialogue. Now, this is really amazing. Maybe it doesn't really sound that amazing, but this is really thanks to the second wave of AI. The word context is very important. Now, remember, why did we want to have a robot? Right? Chatbot is just one type of robot. Why did we want to have a robot? Right? 400 years ago, when we first started, imagining having a robot, we wanted to have a kind of technology that would have the ability to imitate human abilities, right? Now, for chatbot, it's the same. We wanted to have an intangible bot that could imitate human conversational abilities. Now, why ChatGPT is so interesting? Because now it allows, so finally, with ChatGPT, now chatbots can imitate human conversational abilities that are contextual in somewhat convincing manner. So you would actually believe that, okay, this is contextual. Now, let me explain a little bit about this term, contextual. So the key difference between the previous generation of chatbot and this generation of chatbot is the ability to understand context. So context, everyone understands that we are human beings, so typically we understand the current topic of our conversation. We understand the intent, or we try to understand the intent of the person that we're talking with. And we actually could remember a lot of our previous interactions that have already taken place. Now, these are contextual information. Now, let me give you a kind of nerdy example here. See, here there's an excerpt that I got from my own research, right? Very boastful. We talk about 6 levels of chatbot autonomy. For example, level 0, there's no autonomy. The chatbot can only perform pre-programmed responses. Level number 1, chatbot-assisted services. So you're going to have to give the chatbot some suggestions, and the chatbot would give you some answers. Level number 2, task autonomy. This means that the chatbot can perform specific tasks initiated by human beings, such as ChatGPT. Now, what are we talking about? Autonomy. All right, so let's finish this talk about autonomy, and I'll see you in a week's time on the street. And we continue our conversation. And I'll throw the word autonomy into our conversation. You should know autonomy is not commonly used in the context of artificial intelligence. Typically, when you talk about autonomy, you think about politics. You think about geographical locations. But then Imagine I see you next week, same time, on the street, despite we are in the darkness. When I say autonomy, and you'll be like, oh, you're talking about the different levels of autonomy of chatbots. This is pretty natural for human beings. But 2 months ago, chatbot couldn't do that. Now they can. This is very, very important. Now, this is also scary. Why? Because this is not something that researchers have been talking a lot about. Now, so far, what researchers on chatbots and its applications in business and organizations typically talk about these things that everyone are quite familiar with. We talk about privacy, data. We talk about accountability, right? We talk about explainability. So do we really understand the algorithm or not? Now, these are the common challenges of the chatbot. But one thing that we haven't been talking so much about, and which I think should be talked a lot about in this generation, for this generation of chatbot, is this, trust. But in the reversed perspective. Now, if you remember our conversation so far, our discussion on trust in the mainstream research is this. We need to develop a responsible chatbot. We need to develop a responsible AI technologies so that human beings can trust them, right? So that we can trust the AI technologies. But with the second generation or the new generation of ChatGPT, you only need to talk to your friends who are attending university to know how much trust they have towards ChatGPT. So the reversed trust perspective is one that we haven't really talked a lot about, and I feel that it might be a very important thing. Otherwise, our society might be at danger. We're talking about tsunami. I'm playing a little bit of the devil's advocate role here, because I'm the only one that talks about the tsunami, this dire consequence it might have. So far, a lot of our research effort, from social science, from engineering, have been about managing distrust by the users. I guess it's time for us to think about how to manage trust by the users towards AI, right? Because the consequences of trusting new generations of conversational AI could be very serious. Let me give you a reminder of what we talked about at the very beginning of my 10 minutes. Remember public nonchalance? People didn't want to deal with it. Now what we are looking at is the exact opposite. I call it public enthusiasm now. Now a lot of people find chatbots addictive to use. Not difficult to use, but addictive to use. We are willing to engage conversations. Have a show of hand if you use chatbot, please. ChatGPT. If you spend only 1 hour, raise your hand. If you spend more than 1 hour, raise your hand. There you go, thank you. Right, so we're willing to engage conversations. Talk to yourself 2 months ago. That you would call this you crazy, right? And also, another danger is, there is this danger of inadvertent disclosure of sensitive data. We love interacting with the chatbot so much, we actually don't remember how much data we gave the chatbot. So we didn't intentionally leak confidential information, but we might have already. Now, does that scare people already? All right, second, we find information by chatbot authoritative now. Remember, before we find it dubious. Now we find the information authoritative. Talk to my students who use ChatGPT. If they ask, hey, so you got this answer from this prompt to ChatGPT, do you trust it? If you don't trust it, what you do? 2 months ago, they would say, I will Google it. I will Wikipedia it. I will talk to people. Now they will tell you, I will ask ChatGPT to generate another answer. Right? So preference of multiple prompts. This is actually an echo to Evan's point, right? We don't like it. Instead of making a phone call to artist friend, we asked AI to do another one, right? Now, also, we are at the danger of losing our motivation for triangulation, which is looking for information from different sources. Now, recently, I've been teaching innovation, corporate innovation to my undergraduate student at Stratford School. We talk about how companies typically have 3 approaches to innovation. A, they grow innovation organically, they develop it. B, they acquire it. C, they do it collaboratively. So they do some by themselves, or they do some, and at the same time, they collaborate with others. So the danger of acquiring innovation too much is this. Most companies, according to research, that got used to this approach eventually lose their ability to innovate, lose their ability to generate patents. Now, this is similar here. We might lose the motivation for triangulation, and we might lose our vigilance about information authenticity. We don't want to check and verify, but in fact, our colleagues here, our experts here, everyone will tell you that you need to double check, because AI is not that reliable yet. So I'm finishing this. I guess what I'm trying to say here is this. Chatbot is a great thing, but we need to move from existing questions to more futuristic questions. The existing questions that we've been asking ourselves are, for example, what skills are needed in the world of contextual AI? In the world of high autonomy chatbot? We've been talking a lot about this. We talk about what are the new jobs that's going to be created, what are the jobs that will be lost, how do we train our students, the next generation of Canadian citizens, to really live and work in that era. But maybe we need to start thinking about and start asking ourselves futuristic questions. That is, what will happen if our citizens' new evolved skill sets that would eventually become fully compatible with the existence of high autonomy chatbots and other robotic technologies before we fully address the trust issue? In other words, before we fully address this trusting in AI issue, and our society has already become highly compatible with this existence of high autonomy chatbots, then what will we do? Now, whether you are a replacementist, this is a term I coined. Replacementists are people who are worried about AI technology because they think jobs would be replaced. Their jobs would be replaced. Whether you are replacementist or you are collaborationist, actually I got a new term, I think it's much better than my collaborationist, that is the co-pilot. If you're a co-pilot believer, whether you are in the first scenario, the first profile or the second profile, I think this is the important question that you need to start asking yourselves. Thank you very much. That was my talk.
So we take feedback so that we can improve things, from the quality of the beer to what food we provided to the sorts of talks we provided. So please do, I think that Janet, can you tell everybody how they provide feedback, please? If you can please go to the website that where you registered for the event and let us know how we can do better. That's really helpful to all of us. And if there are topics that you want to hear about, we'll also take that if you have suggestions for topics for the future. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks again to the panelists.